We are super honored and excited to have Tahirah here with us today. Tahirah is a senior development and production executive on the original studio film at Netflix, where she collaborates with film producers, writers, directors, and other creative talent to shepherd a diverse slate of film projects through various stages of development and production. Most recently, Tahirah oversaw the development and production of the Netflix original film, The Old Guard, directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood, and critically acclaimed film, Da 5 Bloods, directed by Spike Lee. She has worked in a plethora of films, which you might recognize, such as Always Be My Maybe, Dolomite Is My Name, Arrival, The Forest, and Shut-In. Tahirah holds an MFA from film producing from the prestigious Peter Stark program at USC in 2007. So Tahirah, I'm just gonna jump right in and get us started off if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to start with a couple of fun questions. So what has kept you sane during your quarantine period?
Am I sane? What has kept me sane? Partly like I spent some time back in Virginia, Northern Virginia, where I grew up with my dad. So being around family has absolutely kept me sane. But also, you know, I've recently gotten into woodworking. Where I'm trying to, because I just bought a house and, you know, there are some bespoke things that I want. And I told myself, look, I might just end up with like a bunch of rickety furniture at the end of this, but finding sort of the time and the space to do that, which is using a different part of my brain than I do in my job, has been really calming and relaxing. So I guess that has helped me get through some of this.
Yeah, it gives you like this super productive feeling, right? I remember when I did tech and theater, like we would build things and mine would usually fall apart after a couple of months, but I felt good for those few months that I had it, you know?
Yeah. And also getting into like power tools. So, you know, I never thought I'd be the person who would really want to use like a circular saw or like a chop saw, but it's actually very satisfying. So
yeah, for sure.
I really have enjoyed that. YouTube has been my friend. That's how I learn.
Oh, YouTube. Sorry, what'd you say?
Just learn from watching YouTube videos.
Oh, YouTube, yeah. It's the best way to learn anything these days. Well, speaking of YouTube, what is your favorite television, movie, short form content? What's your favorite piece of content you love?
Right now, I'm really loving WandaVision. And for a couple of reasons. One, I'm just, you know, a big sort of commercial popcorn movie fan, but, you know, other than media studies, I also double majored in psychology. And I love sort of the deeper psychological themes that show is exploring, you know, very human themes through the lens of like a superhuman person. And also I wrote my media studies thesis on sort of, content through history and how different themes that cropped up was telling us, reflecting, sort of sharing what the prevailing concerns and you know, things that were important during that time. So I think that WandaVision's like play with the sitcom format is genius. So right now,
yeah, I mean, I think everyone has been loving that show lately. I am behind because I am the kind of person that needs to binge through because I have grown impatient. Thanks to companies like Netflix, I am now impatient.
I was about to say, sorry, not sorry.
But I think that's something that's really cool, and I'll try and get to that in a later section. And then I always am asking everyone this: what's your favorite restaurant or takeout in Los Angeles, because we're always looking for new recommendations?
You know, longtime favorite is Natalie Thai. I just recently moved to Encino, so I'm starting to explore the valley and what is up here. So I throw that back at you guys. Any recommendations for Valley restaurants, please let me know, especially since Postmates has been my friend also in quarantine.
Yeah, throw them in the chat and we'll create a list and see if we can get it for you, because I also could use that list.
Yeah.
All right. So we know a little bit about you now. So I'd like to go kind of back to the very beginning, if you don't mind. So you told us that you grew up in Virginia with your dad. Yeah, did you grow up like in the Northern Virginia area? I can't exactly remember.
Northern Virginia and Woodbridge, right outside of DC.
Okay, okay. Did you know what you wanted to be when you were growing up?
Absolutely not. I didn't even know what I wanted to be going into college. You know, I had some thought of being sort of a computer science person, but realized I would need too much math for that, and so I put that dream behind me. But you know, I kind of just knew that I loved film and TV, and when I started looking at classes, I gravitated towards those classes that you know kind of interrogated and really broke apart and dissected content across all different kinds of mediums, from journalism to film, TV, and really like audience theory and that kind of stuff. So media studies was something that I was naturally drawn to. Um, and even then, it was like, what do I do with this? And you know, up until I really thought that I wanted to go into producing, but didn't really know what that meant. So that's why I
Mhm.
decided to move out to California and go pursue my MFA in film producing, and was fortunate to get into the Peter Stark producing program. And from there, like I took, every internship I possibly could, and and kind of found my path, my way.
Yeah. All right. So, well, speaking of finding your path, all right. If you didn't know what you wanted to be, what led you to UVA for undergrad?
It's obviously one of the top uh, universities in the country, so that was definitely top of mind. But also, having grown up in Virginia, it was sort of like you went to UVA or you went to Tech or JMU, were kind of
Hmm.
three, or William and Mary if you were super, I don't know, like brainy and then political. But I think just seeing the University of Virginia campus sold me grounds. I'm sorry, it's been too long. Really sold me, and I was a ECHO's fellow, so that also helped make that decision for me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all right, we got to the university. You said you studied media studies. Did you have any other major or minor, or were you just focused solely on media studies?
Psychology. I double majored in
Oh,
psychology.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I love how the brain works, how people, think, and
Mhm.
has helped me even in my business when I have to deal with talent who, just get behind the psychology of dealing with different people.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of creative and theater people too that will study psychology or take psychology classes because they feel it just helps them understand where people are coming from. It helps them creatively when it comes to writing characters, but as you say, it also can help when it comes to dealing with characters themselves, right?
Yes, exactly.
Was there a class or a professor that was extremely influential on you at your time there?
At USC or UVA?
Either one.
Obviously, those people in media studies, Aniko Bajakurzi, she was amazing and was super influential in, my growth and my development, and also helping me get into Stark. She wrote a really nice letter of recommendation for me, so I would definitely say that she was probably the most influential.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm sure I saw some thumbs up and some hearts, so I think you aren't the only person who liked her. Um, um, when did you know? All right, you said you thought you wanted to be a producer. When did you get that thought, or what guided you to that area?
So it's funny because I'm not actually a producer. I'm a studio executive. So, but I have worked on the producing side. They're not that different, just different, sort of skill sets. But definitely, while I was in Stark, like I said, I interned in like all different areas of the business, from television to producing to studio, and knew that I really wanted to be somebody who helped decide what got made and helped, shepherd that. So this side of the business was definitely the thing that I felt was my strongest, or played to my strongest strengths, and also what I felt most passionate about. So that was really where it began to solidify. And then as I worked at different places, being on the studio side and being what we call, obviously a buyer, especially, in this day and age where diversity and inclusion is very important to me, and being, the person who gets to say yes or no in regards to projects is something that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something that I think is really poignant, which is finding your strongest strengths, right? And I think for my own personal journey, that's eventually what led me down the path that I'm on. Is I always thought that I wanted to be a performer. But then when I started studying theater and I started studying the different roles that there are in theater, right? I was like, well, wait a second, this stage management, which is kind of like producing in a sense, this actually might not be, I actually kind of like this as well. And I think I might actually be way better at it than I am at acting, right?
Yeah.
And turns out I was way better at it than I was at acting.
Yeah.
And it was finding that strength and really leaning into it and learning that, like, while I might not have thought it was the thing I would enjoy doing, because I was really good at it, that brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important that we all work to find our strongest strengths and realize that if something's not our strongest strength, that's okay. Knowing that is also just as important. Right.
Exactly. And, there's so many different roles in this business that you can, do, that even within sort of titles like producer or studio executive, there's even different versions of that. So it really is about being an open mind and, trying different things before you find, the thing that you love the most. And by the way, this business is shifts and changes so quickly that, it doesn't, what you're doing now doesn't necessarily mean like that's what you will be doing forever. And as we've kind of seen during COVID, some of those transitions within the business have definitely sped up. So people are doing different things even now than they were, the beginning of last year.
Yeah, for sure. So thinking about, you're about to graduate from the University of Virginia. I guess it's kind of a threefold question. How did you know you wanted to go to grad school? How did you prepare for graduation? And then in all of that, do you have any advice for current students that might be watching that are trying to prepare for that?
Absolutely. So higher education has always been very important in my family, and sort of just the unspoken expectation, although by no means pressure. It just was kind of my dad has his PhD and my sister went to law school and my mom's an RN. And so not going to any grad school, I guess, wasn't even like a thought in my mind. And so I kind of was like, well, let me kill two birds with one stone, and figure out what this film thing is. And as I was looking at sort of the different film schools, obviously the USC name and particularly the START program, its pedigree kind of spoke for itself. And I knew that if I really was serious about wanting to test the waters, like Los Angeles was where I need to be. So, applied to everywhere from, USC to UCLA to LMU. And, eventually I got accepted into START. I guess how did I prepare for graduation? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I just was looking forward to the next chapter of my life. Even though I'd had, really great experience at UVA, I was very much trying to finish my thesis. So I remember that was also a big part of it. And just really did a lot of soul searching, because film and TV, like I was born in Jamaica. My parents are Jamaican immigrants. So it wasn't even a thought in in my sphere of doing this thing. You know, everybody in my families are very like traditional lawyer, nurse, professor. So it was a lot of soul searching, and it was nerve wracking, you know, doing this thing that nobody in my life has ever done before, and therefore not that I couldn't rely on them for advice or support, but that advice or support is not necessarily specific to the thing that I was embarking on, you know? So although I knew that I had them, my parents, my sister, my family, it was like stepping out into like sort of a little bit of the unknown. And I think it helped that a few of my classmates from media studies and UVA that I was close to also were coming out at the same time. So there was like a little bit of support and familiarity there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of hit it there. Like the best way to prepare is to be ready to be uncomfortable, right? Because that's what's going to happen after graduation. It's a lot of uncertainty. It's a lot of unknown. And I remember I got a piece of advice, which was be okay with not being okay. And I was like, but that's not great advice, but that actually was great advice because I maybe in my late 20s, maybe now I've figured it out. I don't even know if I figured it out now, right? But like not being upset because I haven't figured it out yet was a really important lesson for me to learn.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think also being okay with carving your own path and not trying to measure yourself against, you know, your friends or, you know, your classmates in terms of achievement, because, you know, like I said, everybody finds their own way in life and it's not always measured by the same yardstick. It's easy to say and hard to do, especially in the land of like social media where you're seeing people post, but you know, that way just leads to depression and ruin. So yeah, find what you're passionate about and like follow that.
Great advice. All right, well, I mean, that's exactly what you did. You followed your passion. You went to UVA. You got into the Peter Stark program. From there, what did you do there? What were your next steps? How did you sort of end up as the director of development at Lava Bear?
So the next steps were I graduated from the Peter Stark program in 2007, and for those people who have been around the business and in the industry long enough, that was when the last writer's strike was starting to bubble up, which was a really, really poor time to be looking for a job because everybody was getting laid off. And then on the heels of that was sort of the 2008 sort of economic crisis where, you know, companies were shutting down left, right, and center. But the thing that, you know, I held on to and that helped me was the relationships and the places that I had interned during school. And so I started out going back to one of the places where I'd interned, but this time sort of hired as a full-time employee, and which was New Regency Productions. And I worked in the story department. There in the story department, I made connections that allowed me to get my next job, which was at Sony Pictures Animation, because I really was looking to develop my development skill set. And there's no better place to do that than animation, where you basically have to create things from the ground up. But I knew that animation, although I loved it, wasn't sort of the thing that I wanted to be pigeonholed in. So I kind of evaluated what other skill sets I really needed. And, you know, I worked for a producer who had a deal with Disney on the live action side, learning sort of the studio side of filmmaking. And then I felt that I really needed independent producing experience. So that's when I landed at Lava Bear, which was being run by David Lindy, who had been the chairman of Universal. And after he left, he started his own company with Toy Metzger, who was one of the premier CA agents. And they had, you know, some financing, but were really in sort of the independent space and, you know, learning what it means to take movies to market, learning how to sell, how to put things together on the producing side. and kind of worked my way up in Lava Bear to, my last, job there was as director of development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the quintessential story, right? You got to start from the bottom and work your way up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think the thing that, I always tell people is to be humble, and to learn everything you can and really, really be invested in learning, and getting a broad sense of the business, and not just feel like you should be promoted or you should be whatever because you've been at a place for X number of years or, a certain time period. Like really learn the skill that you are currently doing, and also the skill of the next job, because when they say that the best way to get promoted is just to start doing the job that you want, like that's a real thing, especially in our business.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, in all of your kind of job experiences with Lava Bear, what did you find to be kind of the most rewarding aspect of being there within that production company? And then what would you find opposite? Like, what would you find to be the most challenging working within that company?
Absolutely. So definitely the most rewarding thing was getting to learn from people like David Lindy and Tori Metzger, who are just veteran pros, and really learning, the business of independent producing, and learning and just further learning, what studios are looking for, what sells, what is, global, um, and sort of the nuts and bolts of how to make a movie. So that's invaluable, and definitely highly recommend it. Um, the most challenging thing was the fact that the business was already beginning to shift. So we'd gotten through that sort of the 2008 economic downturn, but studios were making less and less, and our business was definitely in selling things to studios. So we would rely on sort of the studio person or exec to want to make a movie. And it felt like more and more the studios were only making sort of sequels, prequels, remakes, things based on IP as opposed to original stuff. So it was very rewarding to get Arrival made while I was there, and to help on that as sort of an original big scope sci-fi idea that had a lot of heart, but at the same time could see the writing on the wall that it would become more and more difficult to sell those sort of original ideas. And also feeling, that I wanted more when it came to being able to support creatives of color, quite frankly, and not seeing that on the film side as much as on the TV side was doing at that point. So yeah.
Can you talk a little as to what the process was like getting a film like Arrival made, like an indie film? And I know it's changed a little bit now, but can you speak maybe a little bit as to like even how you would get the script looked at or something like that,
Yeah, absolutely. I think Arrival, so there's different levels of indie filmmaking. And when I say independent filmmaking, I do mean like outside of the studio system as opposed to like a budget distinction. And so Arrival, I think Lava Bear was a good company to work for because they did have financing. So we were able to partner with 21 Labs and a company called Filmation to develop the script. So right off the bat, that was already, an advantage. And it was, sort of known players. So it wasn't totally sort of, walked in off the street, if you will. So it was developing it. We put up partial financing with Filmation to actually shoot it. But then in order to get distribution, we had to take it to market and take it to different, film festivals. For us, Cannes was one of the first places we took it to, and it ended up selling you know, for an enormous amount of money. And that was even before we shot it. So it was a process of selling off international in part to sort of help finance the film, and then distribute it um, through Universal. So that was sort of that process. I think, you know, when it comes to the other form of independent filmmaker, indie filmmakers, where maybe you don't have the contacts yet, you know, it's I'm not gonna lie, it's super hard. But it is about, you know, entering those writing contests. It is about getting your script into as many hands as you can. You know, obviously respectfully and cognizant of people's times, but I can't tell you enough how we really do look at like who are in those writing contests, or if you have some, you know, Sundance Labs is, you know, an area, or Film Independent is another organization that you can be involved with and interact with, because there are some really, really, really great filmmakers and creatives coming out of those programs as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's really, really great advice. Did you have a favorite project that you worked on when you were at Lava Bear?
It was definitely a rival for many reasons, but the story itself just was, it was so beautiful and heartbreaking, but still had that commercial popcorn sort of sensibility that I love. So, and like big scale story making or storytelling. You know, I just love everything about it.
Yeah, I mean, that film almost doesn't feel like an indie film at all, you know,
Yeah,
which is a testament of how great you guys did. Yeah.
Exactly. And to, you know, like I said, it wasn't necessarily a budget distinction. It was more of the way that it was put together, as opposed to like being, you know, developed within the studio.
All right. Well, so after Lava Bear, did you go straight to Netflix after Lava Bear?
I did, you know, one of the reasons why I went to Netflix when I was looking for my next opportunity was exactly, you know, what I sort of alluded to before, about sort of not seeing enough original film out there, not seeing enough stories told by people who weren't white. And Netflix at that time, so I've been here about 5 years now. They were, you know, they weren't as big as it was now, but they were definitely the ones who were looking to do and tell different kinds of stories, global stories, stories featuring other, people who traditionally have been marginalized in the film business. And also the opportunity as a young executive to really have agency, you know, because
Yeah.
some of the studios have been they stagnated, you know, and they aren't as kind, I guess, coming up, or you don't get involved as much coming up. And the number of films that Netflix does every year, I just by virtue of that have probably made more movies than, you know, anybody else at any other studio. So
Yeah.
you know, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, I want to open it up to questions from the audience in just a few minutes, but can you maybe walk us through how you made the leap to Netflix and sort of what your day-to-day looks like in your position now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Netflix has a very, I wouldn't say it's unique anymore, but it is a true marriage of like sort of tech and Hollywood. And so the process was a little bit different than the normal. In sort of normal Hollywood land, it's definitely like who you know, and sort of what your resume looks like. And it's not different at Netflix, and the process has changed since I started, but it's much more tech when it comes to like, you know, submitting things through HR. But that being said, I did know some people within in the department that I was able to sort of interface with directly. And it was, you know, it was a long process of interviewing at Netflix. You do, like a round robin kind of interview thing, and you have to meet with not only people in your department, but also what we call cross-functional partners. And the Netflix culture is very specific in that they're not only looking for people who are qualified for the position, but also people who could come in and really embody the culture of like freedom and responsibility, and speaking up and using your voice and not being afraid to voice dissent, and just really innovative thinkers. So it was a combination of both tech and Hollywood. I did do the traditional, like have all of my, the people who have mentored me and helped me along the way call and put in a good word, but also it was a lot of just culture fit and really interrogating if this is a company that you believe in and if it's a company that you think that you can thrive in.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've worked on a really impressive slate. I think my favorite might be Always Be My Maybe. That film was hilarious. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. Do you have any favorite projects that you've worked on, or is there any upcoming projects that you'd like to plug?
Always Be My Maybe was definitely one of my favorites. Randall Park and Ali Wong and the director Nanachka Khan. They're just delightful people, and we had so much fun. And we partnered, or the producers Aaron Westerman and Nathan Kahane are just like good people. So that was a really rewarding. We were all working towards like the same aim in that, we wanted to make a movie that was, in the vein of Harry Met Sally, that just happened to have Asian leads, but also have sort of the culture infuse the characters and not just be, kind of colorblind casting. And then really Ali and Randall's story. They, grew up together. They knew each other for a long time, grew up in the Bay. So it was really personal to them. So that was really fun. And I think most recently, obviously getting to work with Spike Lee, who is one of the premier directors in the business, was amazing. We shot in Thailand, and I can't tell you, you haven't lived until you've trekked through the jungles of Thailand with Spike Lee. And plus, we were making this movie before sort of everything that happened over the summer, but it coincidentally, came out at a very, seminal time that spoke to sort of the culture that was going on. And, so I felt really good about being able to contribute to the discussion in the way that I knew how, because I think there are many forms of sort of, I wouldn't even call it protest, but many forms of sort of uplifting and trying to make the world that you would like to see. And for me, it is through, this medium of film and being able to, in a small part, shape sort of what the narratives are and what gets put out there.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And I think that's the perfect place for me to end it and open it up for questions. First off, I just want to say thank you. This has been wonderful chatting with you, just like in that coffee shop prior to COVID a year ago. I'm going to give everyone a chance to you can either raise your hand and we can call on you to ask your question, or if you don't want to ask your question out loud, you can put your question in the chat. I'm going to start with some questions from people who had submitted a question when they pre-registered. So from Amanda Upson, we have, just like many others, I would like advice on how indie partners get access to pitch to Netflix. You sort of already touched on this a little bit, but do you have any sort of recommendations?
Well, first of all, it is about, knowing if you're not represented, first of all, because if you're represented, it's a different, ball game. It's, you go through your agent, your manager, or your entertainment lawyer, and they can get to us. And that's, purely because of a, legal protection for us and for you. But I would say pitching to Netflix you first have to really know what your audience is for your movie or your film or your TV series, and then trying to find the right person to pitch to. And it's, I'm not gonna lie, it's helpful to know somebody on the inside, but also to do your research about what Netflix is looking for, and why you think that your particular movie or TV series would fit in.
Yeah, I think what you just said is something that's really important, that I think it's find someone who will be passionate about the project that you're passionate about, right? Like, I know when I've worked in production companies before, so many times, or working in a law firm rather, we represent a plethora of clients, and I will get the same script sent to me 4 different times for 4 different clients. And it's so obvious that this person didn't take the moment to think, who really should star and drive this vehicle? Who do I want to be producers? Because I think when you can drill it down to those specifics, you can make a true pitch that's passionate for why that person or why that company should take that. But when you're sort of just blasting it out to everyone, I mean, at least in my legal capacity, we basically just have to return it because we say it's an unsolicited submission, we can't submit it. You know, Netflix doesn't have that same legal liability necessarily, but chances are, if you're not customizing it specifically for Netflix or for the specific department within Netflix, it's just too broad, and that's pretty obvious, I think.
And I would, yes, I would second that, and I would also think about who, like, if you don't have a producer, like I would absolutely, that would be the first step before going to a studio, is find that producer who maybe has a contact at Netflix, but is also right for your project and will be a champion of your project and be a driver of your project. You know, both in terms of making it creatively better, but also in terms of like selling it to the right distributor. Because I think the producing piece is so important that we often, you know, want that before we engage on specific projects.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You know, no matter who you are, I think partnering with someone else is often the best idea to get up there. You know, obviously when you partner with other production companies, you're potentially going to lose parts of money, or you might lose like certain rights. But at the end of the day, I think often you have to think about it. Is it worth losing X amount of money or X rights if this gets made versus if it doesn't get made at all, right? And which is it that you are happy with? And it's just really tough. You know, there are numerous scripts out there that are constantly trying to be made, and it really is, you know, fool's luck sometimes that things get made. But I have found when things get made, it's when they catch the attention of someone who is extremely passionate about whatever that project is. And I think it's just about doing that research on that individual.
And like I said, I can't say enough about, and you know, different writing programs or even writing contests if you're a writer, or you know, Sundance or Film Independent, because that is a way that we look at those things. So that is a way to sort of get your project known, and have, you know, a little bit more oomph, a little more behind it.
Yeah. We have a question. This is from Casey Lapidus. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Do you have any advice for a minority woman trying to break out of assistant jobs and into roles that allow for more responsibility within productions? How do you navigate the jobs and projects that you take on?
Absolutely. I think that I think you have to be really good at your job, a strategic thinker. And I think that you have to put in the work, and that whole work, you know, harder than anybody else in the room, especially for, you know, people of color or women who are going into these spaces that are predominantly white and predominantly male. And, you know, there were times when I didn't sleep because I was working, or, you know, went the extra mile, or just really dug in. and it gets noticed. I'm not saying that it's not hard. I'm not saying that it's everywhere, but it does get noticed. And it's honestly, it's like clawing your way up, you know, and finding your niche, you know, and speaking your truth. I think one of the when I stopped trying to fit in and just really started to be me and let my personality out and let the things that I'm most passionate about be heard and known. And that's when I started to sort of differentiate myself from, you know, just the pack, because you have a very valuable experience, a very valuable background, a very valuable perspective that needs to be seen and needs to be heard, and know, you know, sort of when to push, when not to push. So it's a little bit of,
Yeah.
you know, that psychology of how do you manage people as well. But it's tough, but you know, it can be done, and more it is, you know, we're entering spaces and you're seeing more of us there.
Yeah, great answer. From the chat, we've got Michelle who is asking, do you have any recommendations for someone looking to go the documentary route?
Oh, documentary route. That's a good question. Not necessarily my, I don't have a great knowledge base in docs, but I think you should reach out to other alumni and you know, pick their brain, just informational. I know there are some UVA alumni who are out here who are specifically working in docs. I would definitely say, you know, still those festivals or those programs like Sundance and Film Independent are really great in the doc world. And just, you know, when you're asking, just, you know, be respectful and just, you know, state exactly what you want, and be humble and listen, you know. So, and then just go out and do it, honestly. Like, you know, if you're making a doc and you have access to like the subject or the area that you want to make a doc about, like, your best calling card is your work. So if you have the ability to just do it, you know, even if you're shooting on your iPhone or you're shooting like a concept, like proof of concept, I think that is the, and by the way, I can't say how much the medium of like the internet has changed the game, because you don't have to go through sort of the traditional gatekeepers. You can, you know, make your own place on the internet. And a lot of times, you know, these things get noticed or mined from there. So I would start with whatever you have or whatever you have access to and keep going.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Michelle, if you have the email address that was in the registration, if you reach out to me, I'm happy to hook you up with some documentary filmmakers that are UVA alums that are working in the industry. Also from the chat, we've got Jamie. What role do you usually play on set or in post-production as an executive, and how does this differ from a producer?
That's a good question. So as an executive, like, I oversee sort of the totality of the project for the distributor. So in my case, Netflix. So the buck kind of stops with me in terms of what Netflix needs and the direction of the final product. So on set, it's definitely, look, we don't, as an executive, I don't necessarily sit on set unless it's, you know, I need to be there, like the studio presence needs to be there, but definitely watching dailies. Definitely, you know, if there are things that I see happening that we're not getting, I'm flagging them. If I find that, and it's anything from like, oh, this is looking too dark, or don't think we got enough coverage on this, and working with the producers to sort of capture those things that I know we'll need for the end product. And definitely in post, it is, you know, watching every cut, you know, giving notes on everything from, you know, picture to music to, you know, you name it. But also on my side, making sure that we get everything that we need in order to actually physically get it up on Netflix, and overseeing sort of that whole process, especially when it comes to budget, when it comes to approvals. You know, Netflix, the executive side, sort of has final approval on everything unless it's a director with a final cut. That's different than producing, where it's much more in the trenches and in the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day of how does this film actually get made? How does it get captured? Who are the, technicians that I have to get? I know if you're working with the studio, obviously approval from the studio, but it's sort of a deeper level of being next to the film, especially in like post. Obviously on the front end, sometimes projects originate with producers, and they are with the script, they are with the project the longest, and they are the ones who are meant to be driving the project to completion. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of, like I said, the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no. Also from the chat, we've got Genevieve. I'd love to hear more about your decision to get an MFA. What were the reasons? You already sort of touched on this, the reasons that made you go to USC. But now that you've graduated, what do you think the benefits were? And do you think that you'd be where you are today without having attended film school?
I would say personally, no. Do I think I would be where I am? No. However, do I think that you definitely need film school to make in this business? Also, no. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very personal decision. For me, I needed more information. I needed to sort of toe dip first. I didn't feel like I was one of those people who could just move out to California and sleep on somebody's couch until, I figured it out. One of the biggest benefits or things that I got out of the program were the contacts and the USC name, above also like learning sort of a little bit about the business, because the USC Peter Stark producing program was specifically sort of business oriented program, as opposed to some of the others out there that are more crew based. And some of my closest friends in LA still remain from that program, and obviously the professors and the access that it gives you. So for me, it was the right choice. However, it's not necessary or even required for this to do this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From the chat, also we have Amy. You've talked about it a little bit today, but what genres of projects do you prefer to work with? And the second question, what percentage of projects from Netflix are done in-house versus projects that maybe you all license or are outsourcing?
So I'm definitely a big action, big budget sort of girl. So the old guard definitely speaks to me on many levels. And it's everything from, action to thriller to sci-fi. So those are the ones that I like the most. Obviously try to do something that has a little bit more meat in the bone, a little bit more character-based, and are films that, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, you're still pointing back to as sort of the film, as Deadline would say, that lit your fuse. The percentage, look, I think it differs, but I'm in the division that I guess you would call it does productions in-house. And then there's other divisions that acquire and another division that license. Although, moving more towards originals. I don't know about the percentage. I would say we're definitely tipping the balance more into originals than licensed or acquired, but it differs in different years, like this year, I feel like, obviously with COVID has sort of shaken things up a bit, but definitely moving towards, more originals than licensed or acquisitions.
Yeah. From pre-registered, we have Daniel. What does your department look for when hiring at the assistant or coordinator level, and how does one grow within Netflix?
At the assistant level, I think Netflix is again, it operates a little bit differently, and it's changing as all things are. You know, we used to hire people at like sort of a higher level, so not their first jobs, just because the environment of Netflix requires people to like, you know, hit the ground running. However, that being said, we've recognized that that is a barrier to maybe people who haven't had the opportunities that others have, to already come in with the knowledge. So definitely somebody who is a, you know, not only a big picture thinker, but somebody who can get the details, as well, and somebody who can think strategically and about the business. So not just, you know, the day to day of answering the phones or scheduling, which, you know, don't get me wrong, is a big part of being an assistant, but understanding enough about the rhythms of the business to understand who's important, and to, I can't stress enough, like, get ahead of things and think ahead of things, and be able to anticipate both sort of the needs of your immediate, you know, your manager, but also the department. So I think that is probably the biggest skill when it comes to, being an assistant. Coordinators are a little bit, you know, different in that within Netflix, and again, this is specific to Netflix and not necessarily other companies out there, well, coordinators are really junior executives. So they're really what they call CEs out there, in the world, especially on the development side. So that you will definitely have to have, you know, a background of having, you know, been in the business either as an assistant or as, you know, a coordinator in another company, and be able to do notes and be able to interface with talent and be able to sort of figure out what the needs of the company.
From the chat, Anne asked a question. I think it's probably going to be a similar answer to the documentary one. Do you have any advice for someone looking to transition to the animation industry and explore live action? Does that advice differ from just sort of reaching out to UVA alums that are in that sort of industry?
That are in animation and looking to transition out, or looking to transition in? I'm sorry.
Transition out of the animation industry and explore live action instead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it will be somewhat of a lateral movement. So if you're an assistant, try and get an assistant job at another company. You know, obviously different, like if you are an animator, and trying to go into live action, that is a little bit, I think, trickier in that you have to sort of display that you can handle sort of live action storytelling. And that's more on the creative side of things, of just like doing it and showing it. But if you are on the sort of assistant executive side, it would probably, you know, be more of a lateral move.
Yep. From Kate, we were media studies together, and I'm sure many people on this call were. How does your major play into your everyday?
My major played into my everyday, or does in a big way, because a lot of the development stuff stems from, like, you know, knowing film crit, you know, knowing the movies and works that have come before, really being intelligent in how you shape the story, because it's not just project management. It really is, although I'm not writing, and by the way, I suck at writing, but being able to give notes to writers about story structure, you know, and about you know, heroes' journeys. And that comes from studying, you know, the greats. And that comes from understanding audiences and what they want and what satisfies them and what, you know, a great story is. So really a good foundation in that is invaluable. Yeah,
that's really important. From the from pre-registered as well, we have Allegra, I hope I'm saying the name correctly. What national or virtual conferences might you recommend for young professionals in film editing or the production industry? That is to say, workshops, conferences, anything like that that focuses on professional learning and development.
That is a good question. One that I am not as well versed in. However, I do think that, and I keep talking up Sundance and Film Independent, but or various festivals, those are really the places to go because they do have very specific programs if you are more of like a technician. I would say also reach out to the guild that oversees sort of the area that you're interested in. So either if it's IATSE or the DGA or even the WGA, they often have resources for people looking to learn and get into the business. So I think that should be your first place to start.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then obviously, whoever asked that question is already on the right track because they're reaching out to the UVA club and seeing what we're offering, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we've got time for one more question, and then we'll let you go. I'm sure you have a lot of stuff going on. Is there any general advice or counseling you have for someone who's moving to LA in a couple of months?
Moving to LA in a couple of months. Be prepared for, well, who knows with COVID anymore. Be prepared for traffic. Be prepared for things for rent to be super expensive. Find, it may take a couple years, it may take some exploring, but find the area of the city that speaks to you the most. A lot of times people get here and they're like, I hate LA, but it's because they haven't, explored the East Side or they haven't explored, West LA or the Valley. But, there's so much variety here in Los Angeles area that don't judge LA by the first place that you live. So that, I guess that is sort of my number one advice. And also, be open to, and again, it's more difficult during COVID times, but find the people who are, like-minded, and try to weed out those who you may not feel as much affinity to, because LA is definitely a place where people come to realize their dreams. And there are different, people who have different motives, but, if you have an interest, like sign up with, somebody or some group that is also, that has that interest. If it's cooking, if it's woodworking, if it's, hula hooping, whatever it is, do that. And don't forget to breathe. Sometimes the energy of LA, especially in the business, is very stressful, very, superficial, but stay grounded, remember why you're here. And if you're coming for the business, if you are thinking to yourself, oh, I have a backup, or, there's something else that I could be doing, by all means, do that. If you are like, I don't know what else I would be doing if I wasn't in this business because this is my passion, then come here and do that. But if there's anything at all else that you would feel just as happy doing, by God, do that, because it's hard.
That is the best advice, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tahirah, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I wish we could give each other a hug.
I know.
It's so great to hear from you, and it's really lovely to hear more about your story and your journey. This has been extremely helpful. I've written down multiple pages of notes. I'm sure others have taken lots of notes as well. We're recording this, so this will be available on our YouTube page in maybe a week or so. If you registered, you should receive that link in your email, but if you don't receive it in about a week or so time, feel free to reach out to me and I can send that along to you. So Tahirah, thank you again, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. I've had lots of fun, and hopefully didn't bore you to tears.
No, this was incredible. Thank you so much. And everyone have a great rest of your day, okay?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Kate.